"It's strange," I said quietly, staring at the reflection in the cafe window. "How people can look at you and decide you don't belong." That morning started like any other, though I remember every second of it now, the way the rain clung to the glass, the hiss of the espresso machine, the faint hum of a jazz song that had been looping for hours. I was wiping down the counter, my mind half lost in the rhythm of work, when the bell over the door chimed. A family walked in, 3 adults and 2 teenage kids, dressed in neat travel clothes. They looked tired, maybe from a long drive, but the moment their eyes landed on me, something changed in the air. The mother's smile froze. The father's jaw stiffened. The teenage daughter whispered something under her breath. I felt it before they even said a word, that quiet, judging kind of energy that tells you, you don't fit where you are. I felt it all my life, in small doses, the looks, the pauses, the "are you sure you work here" tone of voice. But that day, I wasn't just some employee trying to please a difficult customer. I was the owner. Every inch of that cafe, from the hand-painted mugs to the framed photos on the wall, had been built by my hands. And yet, when the father snapped his fingers and said, "Excuse me, miss, could we speak to the owner?" something deep inside me went cold. I smiled. "You're speaking to her." His brows drew together, the kind of frown that tries to make you disappear. "No, I mean the actual owner, the one in charge." I kept my voice even. "That would still be me." There was a beat of silence long enough to make the room uncomfortable. The mother leaned closer to her husband and whispered something I could only half hear, but the tone was unmistakable. Disbelief wrapped in disdain. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just another entitled customer story. This was something deeper, personal, and much closer to home than I could have imagined, because an hour later I would learn who they were and why they had come. Before all that, before the rain and the family with their polite sneers, my days were simple, steady, and if I'm honest, peaceful in a way I hadn't known for years. My cafe, Juneberry, sat on a quiet corner of town, tucked between an old bookstore and a flower shop that always smelled faintly of lilies and dust. I'd opened it 3 years earlier, after my marriage ended, and I found myself standing in the ashes of everything I thought I knew. The place wasn't big, just 6 tables, a row of window seats, and a kitchen that could barely fit 2 people. The bell over the door chimed, and my brother's in-laws walked into my cafe, not recognizing me at first. That's right, the family demanding to speak to the owner was my brother's wife's parents, the people who had once told me, over dinner, that I should focus on something realistic, not artsy nonsense. I hadn't seen them in nearly 7 years, and now, without knowing who I was, they were standing in my cafe complaining about the help. At first, I played along, not out of fear but curiosity. They ordered coffee with the same clipped tone they used back then. 2 cappuccinos, 1 latte, 2 hot chocolates, the mother Diane recited, like I was taking dictation. Her husband Richard eyed the space. Looks decent enough. I expected more polish for this neighborhood. I smiled faintly, biting back 1,000 replies. "We like to keep things warm and personal here," I said. He nodded distractedly, already turning to the teens. "Let's hope the food's better than the presentation." Lydia shot me a glance from behind the counter, that silent question of, "Are you okay?" I was. At least I thought I was. It wasn't until the youngest, a boy about 16, spilled his hot chocolate that things started to shift. The drink tipped, a dark stain spreading across the table and floor. I rushed over with a towel, but before I could speak, Diane's voice sliced through the air. "Don't touch it," she snapped. "We'll get someone to clean this. You shouldn't be handling this mess." I blinked. "Ma'am, please," she interrupted, lowering her voice but not her tone. "Just call someone, a manager or whoever's actually responsible. This isn't your fault." For a second, I just stared at her, the kind of moment where your body moves slower than your mind. She didn't recognize me. Not yet, and somehow that made it worse. Because while she was dismissing me as some faceless worker, I remembered the dinner where she'd said, smiling across a roast chicken, "Not everyone's meant to succeed, dear. Some people just aren't built for the real world." I remembered sitting beside Ethan, my brother, trying not to cry. I remembered Melinda's laugh, so I wiped the spill anyway, quietly, carefully, and said, "There's no need to call anyone else, Mrs. Carver. I've got it handled." The way her face went still, it was like a curtain lifting in her mind. Recognition flickered. She blinked once, twice, then whispered, "June?" "Yes," I said, standing straight, towel in hand. "It's me." Her husband looked up. "June? As in Ethan's sister," I said calmly, "and the owner of this cafe." The silence that followed was thick enough to chew, the kind of silence where even the coffee machine hesitated to hiss. Then came the disbelief, the shifting glances, the stiff smiles. "Oh," Diane said finally, her voice too sweet. "Well, isn't that something?" Yes, it was something, but not nearly as much as what came next. The silence after Diane's words lingered like steam off hot coffee, visible, heavy, impossible to ignore. Richard cleared his throat first. "Well," he said, glancing around the cafe as if trying to make sense of it. "So this is yours?" "Yes," I said simply, wiping my hands on a towel. "Every bit of it." His eyes traveled across the walls, the wooden shelves lined with ceramic mugs, the chalkboard menu written in my own careful handwriting. "You own it." I nodded. He gave a low whistle and leaned back in his chair. "Well, I'll be damned." Diane didn't laugh. Her lips were tight, her posture stiff. "That's nice," she said after a long pause. "Really unexpected. Unexpected." That word landed like a pebble in my chest, small but sharp. Lydia came by with their drinks, placing them carefully on the table. Diane muttered a soft thank you without looking up. The kids, oblivious to the tension, scrolled on their phones. I tried to walk away, to let them finish in peace, but then Richard spoke again casually, as if I weren't standing 2 feet away. "So this is what you've been owing since—" He trailed off, not bothering to finish. "Since the divorce?" I supplied quietly. He gave a small shrug, pretending embarrassment he didn't feel. Yes, I said. "This is what I've been doing." Diane stirred her coffee, the spoon clinking against the cup like a metronome marking judgment. "Well, I suppose it's good to keep busy," she murmured. "We all find our little hobbies." Lydia froze mid-step. I caught her eye and shook my head slightly, a silent plea to stay calm. "Hobbies. This cafe was my life's work, built from late nights and small loans, from tears and burned muffins and endless self-doubt." And she called it a hobby. But I'd learned something over the years. Silence, when used right, is more powerful than any argument. So I smiled, soft but steady. "I'm glad you stopped by. It's not often I see family here." Richard gave a chuckle. "Well, it wasn't planned. We were on our way to Ethan's, thought we'd grab something along the road." Ethan, my brother. The name sat heavy between us, like a secret we were all pretending not to know. I hadn't spoken to him in almost 3 years. The last time we'd been in the same room, we'd said things that couldn't be unsaid. I remember his voice shaking when he said, "You always have to make things about you, June." But what hurt more wasn't what he said, it was how easily he'd let others shape what he believed about me. That afternoon, the Carvers stayed longer than I expected. Long enough for Diane to notice the family photos on the wall, not of my family, but of regulars, small moments frozen in time. A toddler's first ice cream, a couple celebrating an anniversary. "Do you live here?" she asked at one point. "Not far," I replied. "With anyone?" Her tone wasn't curious. It was evaluative, like she was checking boxes on a report card. "No," I said. "Just me." Her eyes flicked briefly with satisfaction. Ah, there it was, that wordless condescension that said, "See, still alone." But I didn't give her the reaction she wanted. I kept smiling, kept serving, kept being exactly what they didn't expect, composed, confident, grounded. They finished their drinks quietly, leaving their cups half full, as if the taste didn't suit them. When they finally stood to leave, Diane hesitated at the counter. "June," she said, with that same polite smile she'd worn years ago at my wedding, "it really is nice what you've done here." "Thank you," I said. "I mean it," she added quickly. "You've clearly found your level, my level." The words slipped under my skin like a splinter. Still, I only nodded. "Safe travels," I said gently. "Give my regards to Ethan and Melinda." She blinked. "You know about dinner? She looked briefly flustered, then forced another smile. "Oh, I suppose Ethan didn't tell you. They're hosting a family dinner tonight. Just something casual." I could feel Lydia's eyes on me again, sensing the storm that was quietly building. "No," I said slowly. He didn't mention it. Diane's mouth curved into something almost pitying. Oh, I'm sure it just slipped his mind. And with that, they left, leaving the faint scent of expensive perfume and something sour behind. For the rest of the afternoon, I couldn't focus. My hands moved through the motions, grinding beans, wiping tables, but my mind was elsewhere. A family dinner, my own brother hosting one, and no invitation for me. It shouldn't have hurt as much as it did. After all, we hadn't been close in years. But still, the idea of them all gathered around a warm table laughing, while I was here wiping down counters, it stung. When I finally closed up for the night, the sky was deep blue and the street was quiet. I sat by the window watching the lights from passing cars blur through the glass. I told myself to let it go. To focus on what I had, not what I'd lost, but somewhere deep down something whispered, you deserve to know the truth. Because something about Diane's visit didn't feel accidental. 2 days later, I got a call from a mutual friend, Anna, who used to work with Ethan. She stopped by for coffee, wearing that look people have when they're not sure whether to speak or stay quiet. June, she said softly, stirring sugar into her cup. I don't know if this is my place, but I think you should know something. I set down the plate I was holding. What is it? She hesitated. Ethan's in some trouble, financial trouble. My chest tightened. What kind of trouble? His business is struggling, she said, and from what I heard, he's been talking to Richard about investors. Apparently, they're trying to help him secure funding for something new. I frowned. What does that have to do with me? Anna sighed. Well, Richard mentioned your cafe, said something about how you've been lucky, and that it's a shame you aren't using your space for more family-oriented ventures. My stomach dropped. Wait, I said slowly. They were talking about Juneberry? T. Carver. I let out a quiet breath. Yes, they did. Ah, a small pause. How'd that go? You tell me, I said flatly. They came here on purpose, didn't they? He exhaled slowly. Okay, look, maybe they did, but it wasn't supposed to be weird. They just wanted to see your cafe, you know. They've been talking about helping me with something and your place came up. Helping you? Yeah, I've been planning a small business, a sort of community workspace/bakery idea. We thought maybe partnering with you would make sense. You've got the atmosphere. I've got the expansion plan. He said it so smoothly, like it was already settled, like I was just waiting for him to call and hand over the keys. Expansion plan, I repeated. Ethan, this cafe isn't a branch to attach your project to. It's my work. I know that, he said quickly, and I respect it, okay? But you've got to see this could be good for you. For both of us. You've been running this place alone for years. Don't you ever think about scaling up? Making it bigger? I almost laughed. Bigger. That word again, as if growth was only measured in square feet and revenue charts. Not everything needs to be bigger, Ethan, I said quietly. Some things just need to be right. He sighed. You always do this. You take everything personally. It's business, June, not an insult. It becomes personal when you send people to judge me without telling me. There was silence on the line. Then, softly, he said, They didn't mean to judge you. I smiled sadly. Yes, they did, but it's fine. I'm used to it. June. Ethan, I interrupted. If you want to talk about a partnership, you can come here. We'll talk. You, me, no one else. I'll listen. He hesitated. Okay, he said finally. Tomorrow evening. 7? 7. When I hung up, I stared at the phone for a long time. I wasn't sure if I wanted to see him, but something inside me needed to. Not just for answers, for closure. The next day, I prepped the cafe for his visit like it was any other evening. Tables cleaned, lights dimmed just right, the faint smell of cinnamon and espresso hanging in the air. But inside, I was restless. My hands wouldn't stay still. When he finally walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. He looked tired, older, thinner, the sharpness in his eyes dulled by something heavier than work stress. Hey, he said, forcing a smile. Hey. He looked around the cafe, his gaze softening for a second. It's beautiful, June. Really, thank you. We sat down at a corner table, the same one where Diane had judged my presentation. For a few moments, the silence between us was almost comforting, like a familiar ache. So I said, breaking it, tell me about your plan. He leaned forward, hands clasped. All right, the idea is a co-op, a blend of a bakery, lounge, and workspace. Something modern. We'd need a strong foundation, a location that's already known and trusted. Juneberry could be that. And in return? I asked. He hesitated. You'd have a stake, of course, but investors, mostly the Carvers, would handle the financing. They'd want some oversight, maybe even management roles, just to ensure it runs smoothly. I stared at him. So I'd lose control of my own cafe? Not lose. Share, he said, as if the word made it softer. It's a win-win. Ethan, I said slowly, do you really think the Carvers want to help me or help themselves through you? He opened his mouth, but I didn't give him the chance, because the last time I checked, they barely believed I could make coffee without supervision. And now they want to invest in my work? No, that's not help, that's ownership. His jaw tightened. You're being unfair. Unfair, I whispered. I watched them look me in the eye and treat me like I was beneath them, in my own shop. And you're telling me to trust them? He looked down. For a moment, I saw the brother I used to know, the one who hated confrontation, who tried to keep everyone happy, even when it broke him. I'm just trying to fix things, he said softly. UK, now how hard it's been. The debts, the pressure. They're my in-laws, June. If they pull out, I lose everything, and you thought I'd save you. He didn't answer. I leaned back, letting the truth settle. He hadn't come to collaborate, he'd come to cash in on blood and guilt. Finally, I stood. Ethan, I love you, I said, my voice trembling, but I won't let you turn my life's work into your safety net. I can't. He looked up, his face pale. So you're really choosing pride over family? No, I said quietly. I'm choosing peace, something you might not understand yet. He opened his mouth to reply, but before he could, the bell above the door chimed, and in walked Diane. She stopped short when she saw us, her expression flickering between surprise and calculation. Oh, she said too brightly. I didn't realize you two were meeting already. I glanced at Ethan, his shoulders slumped. She insisted on coming, he muttered. Diane smiled, all charm. Just wanted to make sure everything's civil. We're family after all. I took a slow breath. Then please, have a seat. Let's be civil, because I had decided something in that moment. If they wanted to treat me like a small business they could manipulate, I'd show them just how much power they'd underestimated, and it would start right there at my own table. Diane slid into the chair across from us, her posture perfect, her smile the kind that tried too hard to seem warm. Richard trailed behind her, already scanning the cafe, probably looking for weaknesses. I folded my hands on the table, calm, deliberate. Ethan avoided my gaze, like he already knew I'd take the lead in this conversation. Diane began. So, we heard there's a potential partnership being discussed. Isn't that exciting? I nodded slowly. It could be, if the terms were fair. She tilted her head, the faintest edge of condescension in her voice. Fair? Oh, June. Sometimes business requires flexibility. Compromise. I let the word hang in the air. Flexibility doesn't mean surrender, I said, and compromise doesn't mean giving up everything you've worked for. Richard finally spoke. Come on, June. We're just trying to help Ethan and you. This could be good for everyone. Good? I repeated, voice soft but firm. You came into my cafe, judged my work, and now you call your attempt to control it help. That's not good. That's manipulation. Diane's fingers tapped the table. Manipulation, really? Yes, I said. You underestimated me. You assumed I would let family loyalty or guilt guide my decisions. You assumed I couldn't run my own life. Her lips tightened. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Ethan's eyes flicked between us, frustrated. June, please, let's not make this personal. I just want your cooperation. Cooperation? I said, leaning forward slightly. You want my cafe. You want to use my hard work to patch your financial problems. That's not cooperation. That's taking advantage. Richard leaned back, the first real crack in his confidence showing. Now, June, that's a bit harsh. I tilted my head. Harsh. Maybe, but accurate. You walked in here thinking you could size me up like a piece of property without realizing I'm the owner. And you were wrong. The silence that followed was heavy. Diane's eyes darted to Ethan, silently pleading for some form of intervention, but he just sat there, small and unsure. I let a slow breath out. You've treated me like a child all my life, like I'm incapable, like anything I've accomplished is insignificant. And for what? So you can feel superior? Diane's mouth opened, then closed again. Richard's jaw clenched. Ethan swallowed hard. And yet, I said, softer now, I still offered him a chance to work with me honestly on my terms. But you? I gestured to the Carvers. You walked in expecting me to surrender. Her eyes narrowed slightly. June, that's enough. You can't talk to us like that. Oh, I can, I said, my voice calm, deliberate. Because this isn't just about me, it's about respect. ND respect isn't given, it's earned. And you. I paused. Letting the weight settle assumed it came automatically because we share a family name. Richard's face went pale. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I let that silence linger, let the truth sit between us. Then I leaned back, smoothing the napkin in front of me. If you're here for a partnership, there's only one condition. I decide the terms. I run my cafe. I choose my collaborators. And if you cannot accept that... Diane's eyes flickered, betraying anger and shock. And if we cannot accept that? You leave, I said. You walk out and don't come back, because nothing, no family tie, no guilt, no financial leverage will make me surrender my life's work to people who do not respect me. The words hung in the air like smoke. For the first time, I saw Diane falter. Her composure cracked just enough for me to know she understood. Richard looked down at his hands, muttering something I couldn't hear. Ethan finally spoke quietly. June, I didn't realize. You didn't realize what? I asked gently, softening my tone. That they'd never respect you or me the way we respect ourselves? That we can't rely on them to act fairly? His eyes glistened. I wanted things to be easier. I reached across the table and placed my hand on his. I know, Ethan, but easier isn't always right. Easier often comes at a cost in this case, your integrity, your independence, mine. He swallowed hard, nodding slowly. Diane opened her mouth again, as if to argue, but I shook my head. There's nothing more to say. You've seen where your assumptions got you. And if you value this family connection, you will respect me fully, as the person I am today, not as the person you once dismissed. The Carvers didn't respond. Instead, they gathered their things. Silent, tense. Diane's smile was gone, replaced with a tight line across her lips. Richard's eyes flickered toward Ethan, a look that said, I miscalculated. And just like that, they walked out. The bell chimed, and the cafe door closed behind them. I exhaled, leaning back in my chair. Lydia, who had been quietly observing from the counter, finally smiled. Wow, she said. That was impressive. I nodded, letting the tension drain. Sometimes, I said softly, people need to see exactly what they underestimated. Ethan stayed behind, still pale but calmer. June, he said quietly, thank you for standing up, for me and for yourself. I smiled faintly. Always for both, Ethan. Always for both. We sat there in silence for a few minutes, letting the weight of the confrontation settle. Outside, the streetlights flickered on as evening approached. Inside, the cafe was warm and familiar, the smell of cinnamon and espresso comforting. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of closure with them, not forgiveness yet, but clarity, and clarity, I realized, was worth more than approval ever could be. The night after the confrontation, sleep didn't come easily. My mind replayed every word, every expression, every pause. Diane's judgment, Richard's smug confidence, Ethan's hesitation, all of it settled into a quiet storm in my chest. By morning, I realized something important. I couldn't undo what had happened. I couldn't make them see the years they'd wasted underestimating me. But I could control what came next, and that's exactly what I intended to do. I started by preparing the cafe for the next day as usual, cleaning tables, polishing the espresso machine, rearranging the chairs. But this time, there was purpose behind every movement. Every corner of the cafe would whisper the truth about who ran this place. By mid-morning, regulars noticed a difference. There was a calm, almost electric energy in the air, a sense that something had shifted. Lydia noticed too, giving me a quiet nod. She didn't ask questions, she already knew. The first clue that the Carvers' visit would ripple beyond that afternoon came in the form of phone calls. Friends, customers, even Loca. Business owners started dropping by with smiles, comments, and congratulations. Word travels fast, doesn't it? Lydia murmured, laughing softly as a customer mentioned the showdown in my cafe. I smiled faintly. Better let them see the truth firsthand, I said. By noon, the cafe was buzzing. People lingered over lattes, sharing murmured stories about family drama, judgment, and standing one's ground. And for the first time, I noticed something I hadn't expected, a quiet sense of admiration from strangers. Not pity, not judgment, respect. The Carvers returned 2 days later. They didn't knock or announce themselves, they simply appeared, peering through the glass door. Diane's smile was brittle this time, forced. Richard's jaw was tight, the first sign of genuine discomfort I'd seen from him. I didn't approach them immediately. I stayed behind the counter, watching, letting the tension stretch. Finally, Diane stepped inside, her voice carefully cheerful. "June, may we talk?" I set down the cup I was polishing. "Of course," I said, calm. "Sit. But this time, let's speak honestly." They sat, but this time their composure had a crack. Diane's fingers tapped nervously on the table. Richard avoided my eyes. "June," Diane began, softer now, "we underestimated you. We saw your cafe, and we judged without understanding." I let that hang. "I told you, respect isn't automatic," I said quietly. "It's earned. And your assumptions almost cost me and Ethan a lot." Richard spoke, his voice low. "We see that now. We shouldn't have walked in expecting to control or influence you. That was wrong." I nodded slowly. "Good. That's the first step." Diane's eyes flicked toward Ethan. "We also wanted to apologize for our behavior, for how we treated you in the past." I considered it carefully. "Apologies can be powerful, but only if they're genuine." "Thank you," I said softly. "I accept it. But acceptance doesn't mean trust is automatic. That has to be earned too." Richard cleared his throat. "We understand, and we'd like to support you now honestly, as equals, if that's acceptable." I leaned back in my chair. Support isn't about control, it's about partnership, something you failed to recognize before. Let's start there. For the first time, Diane and Richard hesitated. No rehearsed smiles, no condescension, just two people realizing they had misjudged someone they thought they knew, and in that moment I understood something crucial. The real victory wasn't in confrontation or revenge. It was in standing firm, setting boundaries, and letting the truth, my truth, shine on its own. The public consequence of their earlier behavior unfolded slowly but unmistakably. Word had spread through our small town about the Carvers' misjudgment. Local business owners mentioned it, regulars whispered about it, and even a few distant relatives reached out privately, praising me for handling the situation with grace. It was quiet, dignified, and powerful. The Carvers' reputation subtly shifted. No one needed to humiliate them. Their overreach had done that naturally. I kept running the cafe as usual, but now with a renewed sense of purpose. Every latte, every conversation, every gesture of hospitality became a statement. This was my space, and I was unshakable. The first real test came 2 weeks later. Diane returned, alone this time, and approached the counter with a tentative smile. "I wanted to see how things were going," she said softly. I handed her a cup of coffee. "I'm glad you came. The cafe's been busy. People seem to enjoy the atmosphere." She nodded, sipping cautiously. "It's impressive. You've created something really special here." "Thank you," I said. "It wasn't easy, but it's mine, and I've learned something important through all of this." Diane tilted her head. "What's that?" "Never underestimate someone because of family history, past mistakes, or assumptions," I said. "Respect is earned, not given. And if someone wants a piece of your life, they have to approach it with honesty and integrity, not judgment." Her eyes softened. "I understand. And I'm sorry for not recognizing it sooner." I nodded. That's all I needed to hear. We shared a quiet smile, not warmth born of familiarity, but of understanding. When she left, I exhaled deeply, letting the weight of weeks of tension fall away. For the first time in years, I felt completely in control of my life. My cafe, my decisions, my boundaries. That evening, I closed the cafe and sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the dusk. The hum of the espresso machine had quieted, replaced by the soft rhythm of my own breathing. I thought about Ethan, Diane, Richard, and all the assumptions they had made about me over the years. And I realized that their biggest mistake wasn't underestimating me. It was expecting that I would let them. I smiled faintly, letting the warmth of the cafe envelop me. My life was my own, my work was my own, and my peace finally was my own. By the end of that week, the ripple effect of the confrontation began to reach beyond the cafe walls. Word travels fast in a small town, and the story of the Carvers walking in, assuming they could judge and control me, had found its way to more ears than I expected. At first it was just whispers from regulars. "Did you hear about the family drama at Juneberry? Yeah, the owners-in-law thought they could boss June around." Then comments came from unexpected places, neighboring business owners, a few local journalists looking for human interest stories, even a community group on social media. Everyone seemed fascinated by the quiet dignity with which I had handled the situation. The Carvers were suddenly on the defensive. Their polite veneer slipped, replaced with awkward phone calls and halting attempts to clarify themselves to anyone who would listen. I didn't intervene. I didn't need to. Justice, in its quietest form, was already unfolding. The day they walked into my cafe again this time, hoping to smooth things over, I realized I had the upper hand, not because of confrontation, but because of how I carried myself. They paused at the door, Diane in particular. She looked around at the bustling cafe, at happy customers, at the tables filled with laughter and conversation. A small frown tugged at the corners of her mouth. "You see," I said calmly from behind the counter, "this is what happens when respect is earned, not assumed. People respond to authenticity, diligence, and integrity, not to judgment." Richard muttered something under his breath. Diane pressed her lips together. Neither spoke for a moment. I continued quietly, gently. "You underestimated me. You assumed your status as family would give you power. But power, real power, comes from trust, competence, and consistency. And you walked in here forgetting that." Diane's shoulders slumped slightly, the first visible sign of genuine remorse. Richard's eyes darted to Ethan, who stayed silent but sat straighter than he had in weeks. "I understand," Diane said finally. "We misjudged you." "Yes," I said, nodding. "You did. But understanding it now is the only thing that matters. Everything else is simply consequence." And consequence, in this case, came quietly but firmly. The Carvers' attempts to regain influence over Ethan's business ventures fizzled. Their friends and associates, now aware of how they had treated me, began to distance themselves. People started questioning their judgment and fairness, not openly in dramatic confrontations, but in subtle ways that matter most in a small town: the whispered doubts, the cautious glances, the slow retreat of support. Meanwhile, my cafe thrived. Regulars were more loyal than ever. New customers arrived daily, drawn in by the story of the owner who stood her ground and ran her life with dignity. The local press even featured an article highlighting the transformation. "Small-town cafe owner asserts independence, earns respect." I never intended to make the carve. RS look bad publicly. I simply ran my cafe, my way, letting truth and competence speak louder than drama ever could, and the result was a public vindication that didn't need to be forced. The Carvers eventually stopped coming entirely. Diane sent a brief message, a carefully worded note of apology and acknowledgement of my terms. Richard didn't reach out again. And Ethan? He stayed. He returned to the cafe that afternoon, quietly slipping in through the back door. His expression was uncertain, but there was relief there too. "I've been thinking," he said, settling into a chair across from me, "about everything, about how they, about us, about me." I nodded. "It's a lot to process." "I know," he said, "and I realize now that I can't rely on them to fix anything for me or for you. I have to figure things out for myself. I just didn't want to lose the chance to be a part of your world again." I smiled faintly. "Then start by respecting it. That's all I've ever asked." He exhaled, and I saw the old Ethan again, careful, thoughtful, a little afraid of being wrong but willing to learn. "I will," he promised, and that was all I needed. The days and weeks that followed were quiet but meaningful. The cafe became a hub not just for coffee but for stories, connections, and community. People shared their own experiences of judgment, of underestimation, of finally standing up for themselves. They found solace and inspiration in what had happened here, in the quiet power of boundaries and dignity, and for me, life returned to a rhythm I could trust. I focused on the cafe, on crafting new recipes, on welcoming each customer with warmth and attention. I rebuilt trust with myself first, and with Ethan second. One afternoon, a neighbor stopped by with a smile. "I heard about what happened with the Carvers," she said. I wanted to say, it was incredible how you handled it. I shrugged, a small smile playing on my lips. It wasn't about them, I said quietly. It was about standing for myself. And sometimes, that's the hardest part. She nodded, understanding. Well, it's inspiring. You've created something beautiful, and you didn't let anyone take it from you. No, I said softly, looking around at the cafe that had become my sanctuary. Not anyone. For the first time in years, I felt unshakable. I realized that life would always present challenges: family, business, even strangers trying to assert control. But the real lesson, the one I hope everyone understands, is this. Respect is non-negotiable. Boundaries are sacred. And when you stand firm, when you act with calm conviction and integrity, even the most judgmental people will be forced to recognize the truth. It's not about revenge. It's not about proving them wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you are enough, that your work, your choices, and your dignity cannot be stolen. And for the first time, I knew with absolute certainty that mine never could be. The months after the Carver's departure passed in a rhythm that felt both familiar and new. The cafe thrived, not just as a business, but as a place where my life, my effort, my creativity, my choices, was honored by everyone who walked through the doors. Ethan stayed close, not as a shadow of the past, but as a partner in life, in friendship, in family, in shared responsibility. Slowly he regained his confidence, stepping back from the influence of his parents and finding his own footing. I watched him with pride, remembering the boy I had grown up with, and the man he was becoming, someone who could finally see me as I had always been. It was not easy. There were days when I caught myself replaying Diane's smirk, Richard's judgment, the casual way they had assumed control over something that wasn't theirs. It was tempting, at times, to let bitterness creep in. But I had learned my lesson. Bitterness gives them power, calm, dignity, and perseverance gives me freedom. One quiet evening after closing time, I lingered at the count, the scent of baked bread and coffee still lingering in the air. I noticed a note tucked beneath the register. One of my regulars had left it. Thank you for showing strength. You inspire us all to stand tall in our own lives. A friend. I smiled softly, folding the note carefully. It wasn't recognition from the Carvers or my family. It was acknowledgement from strangers who saw the truth in my choices, and that meant more than anything else ever could. I thought about that for a long time. Life, I realized, isn't about demanding respect from the people who think they own your story. It's about earning your own respect and letting others see it naturally. Ethan came by that evening to close up with me. He leaned against the counter, watching the last of the customers leave. You know, he said quietly, I never realized how strong you were until all this happened. I mean, really strong. I smiled faintly, reaching for a towel to wipe down the counter. Strength isn't about yelling or fighting. It's about knowing who you are and refusing to let anyone take that from you. He nodded slowly. I think I understand now. I just wish I'd seen it sooner. Most people only see what they want to see, I said. It's not your fault. What matters is what you do with what you learn. He exhaled, a weight lifting from his shoulders. I want to do right by you, June. I want to support you, not try to control or use you. That, I said softly, is the best start. The next few weeks brought small, quiet victories. Regulars who had once been hesitant to share their own stories started opening up, telling me about situations where they were underestimated, dismissed, or belittled. They told me how watching someone stand up calmly, with grace and authority, gave them courage in their own lives. I realized that my experience, painful and infuriating as it had been, had become a source of empowerment for others. That, more than anything, felt like healing. One afternoon, while reorganizing the shelves, I noticed a familiar figure outside the cafe. Diane was watching from the sidewalk, a cautious, almost hesitant smile on her lips. I stepped outside, leaving the door open behind me. Hello, Diane, I said softly. She nodded, her voice quiet. June, I just wanted to say, I respect what you've done here. I understand now. Truly, I studied her for a long moment, seeing the flicker of genuine remorse beneath the polished exterior. Thank you, I said. That means more than you know. She hesitated. Do you forgive me? I smiled gently, feeling the final piece of closure settle inside me. Forgiveness isn't for them, I said softly. It's for us. And yes, I forgive. But don't mistake it for trust. That's something you'll have to earn. Her eyes softened, and she gave a small nod before walking away. I watched her disappear down the street, the bell above my cafe door jingling in the quiet afternoon air. It was in that moment I realized the full lesson of the ordeal. Life doesn't always reward people immediately. Family doesn't always behave the way we hope. People will judge, manipulate, and underestimate us. But we have a choice. We can let their actions dictate our worth, or we can stand firm, protect our boundaries, and live our lives fully and honestly. The choice isn't easy. Expectations. One evening, as I was locking up, Lydia lingered beside me. "You've changed so much since all this started," she said quietly. I smiled softly, glancing around the warm glow of the cafe. "I've learned that peace doesn't come from others' approval. It comes from within, and I finally claimed mine." She nodded. "It's inspiring. I feel like anything is possible here." "Exactly," I said, closing the door behind us. "Anything is possible when we stop letting other people define us." As I sit here now in the quiet glow of the cafe lights, I reflect on everything that happened, Diane, Richard, Ethan, and the storm that almost shook my life apart. And I realize something essential. Life will always test us. Not always gently, and not always fairly. Sometimes the hardest trials come from the people we expect to love and support us the most. But here's the truth I've come to understand. You cannot control how others behave, only how you respond. You cannot force respect, only embody it. You cannot hand your peace to someone else, you must claim it for yourself. When the Carvers demanded to speak to the owner, they thought they could intimidate me, manipulate me, or convince me to step aside. But they didn't understand. The most important thing, I had already become the owner not just of this cafe, but of my choices, my life, and my dignity. And that ownership is quiet, powerful, and unstoppable. I don't tell this story to boast. I tell it to remind anyone listening that boundaries are sacred. Respect is non-negotiable. And standing firm even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's family, even when fear whispers that you should yield, is one of the bravest acts you can perform in your life. Ethan, my brother, learned that too. He saw that real strength isn't about domination or control. It's about patience, integrity, and courage. Watching him grow into someone capable of seeing me as an equal reminded me that people can change, but only if we give them the truth to see. And as for Diane and Richard, the lesson was theirs, whether they accepted it or not. Sometimes consequences arrive not as punishments, but as quiet acknowledgments from the world. People notice when someone oversteps, underestimates, or dismisses another. The truth has a way of speaking for itself. I look around this cafe, the tables, the aroma of coffee, the soft hum of conversations, laughter echoing in warm corners, and I feel grateful. Not for what I've endured, but for what I've become. Grateful for clarity, grateful for boundaries, grateful for the resilience that has grown quietly inside me. And I hope that anyone listening understands this. You are capable of standing firm. You are worthy of respect. And no one, not family, not friends, not strangers, can ever take that from you unless you let them. So I ask you, gently, as I close this chapter of my story, would you have stood your ground the way I did? Or would you have let fear and expectation dictate your choices? Take a moment to reflect. Think about the spaces you occupy, the people you allow in your life, and the boundaries you've yet to claim. Life is fleeting, and your dignity? That's yours alone to protect. Thank you for sitting with me through this story. If you felt a spark of courage, a sense of hope, or a little bit of empowerment, I hope you carry it forward. Share it with someone who needs it. Stand for yourself. And remember, being the owner of your life, truly owning it, is the bravest act of all.